And good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday, May 6th, 2017 edition of Auto Talk. I am your host, Ed Welsh, and for the rest of this hour, we will be discussing matters that are of pertinence to you and your automobile. As always, we hope to impart to you some useful automotive information and perhaps provoke some automotive conversation on this kind of a cold, kind of a rainy Saturday morning in Mohawk Valley. Good morning, and grab a cup of coffee, turn up the radio a little bit, sit back, kick back, and relax. We've got lots of great stuff to talk about today. But first, we want to get to our car care tip of the week. And that's got to do with some motorcycle safety. You know, May is Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. And although I don't ride motorcycles, I did when I was a young man, but I love motorcycles. And I love all shapes and sizes of them. But you know what? There's some issues out there. And I'm always very concerned about them. So being that it's Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month, I want to talk about that for a few minutes. With summer here, of course, almost here, at least allegedly on its way, right? It's talking about snow tomorrow. But, you know, the safe riding and cooperation among everybody on the road is really essential to reduce motorcycle deaths and injuries. When we look at the latest report from the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, they reported that basically there was 4,976 motorcyclist deaths in 2015. Obviously, the 2016 data is not in yet. But that's up 8.3% from 2014. The federal government estimates that on a per-vehicle mile basis, motorcyclists have more than a 27 times more likely chance to die in a crash. So, if you think about those odds for a minute, that's pretty staggering. And it should give us all pause, whether you ride a motorcycle or not. Because 27 times the chance of being killed in an accident on a per vehicle mile basis, that's a big risk. That's a very big risk. And there's nothing like the feeling the fresh air of the open road. I will tell you, it is very, very alluring and very satisfying if you ride a bike. But I can also tell you that people who ride bikes are absolutely frightened, and should be, about what's around them. Now, to be fair, many of the motorcycle crash data that I looked at, the risk factors and what causes a lot of these deaths are somewhat self-induced. For example, the lack of helmet use, and alcohol involvement, and speeding, and not being properly licensed are really some of the main causes of these fatalities, because obviously a serious head injury is fairly common in motorcycle crashes, and if you're not wearing a helmet, well, obviously it's a pretty simple thing to figure out. Kids get hurt falling off a bicycle without a helmet. Imagine the odds of getting your head hurt in a motorcycle accident on the highway. Now, according to the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, in 2017, motorcycle helmets saved about 1,700 lives. And, of course, besides the obvious safety benefits, only 19 states and the District of Columbia mandate helmet use. And that's down from 26 in 1997. And really, since then, motorcycle fatalities have more than doubled. So the anti-helmet folks have been effective in getting these rules changed to their own peril. And I'm not going to pass judgment on them. I understand the philosophy, but at the end of the day, you're really taking your life in your hands, literally, if you ride a bike or a passenger on a bike without a helmet. And, of course, alcohol is also a factor. And, again, I can't imagine driving a car drunk, let alone a motorcycle. Your judgment and your decision-making ability and your reaction time is totally impaired with any kind of alcohol. And according, again, to the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, 43% of motorcyclists are killed in single-vehicle crashes were alcohol impaired. So that's kind of self-induced. Both the helmet issue and the alcohol issue are both self-induced issues. But putting that aside, I will tell you that careless drivers in cars are absolutely the scariest thing that motorcycles think about when they're on the road, especially if they're riding alone. When there's a group of bikes together, you kind of see them as a group. But when they're by themselves on a gray day, or a blind intersection, or backing out of a driveway, or go down all the lists of things you can think about that maybe you don't see something, that is what scares motorcycle people a lot. I sometimes wonder if some of the bikes are loud just so people will hear them, not just see them. So, again, I love motorcycles, and I just absolutely love seeing them, all shapes and sizes, and they absolutely have every right to be on the road with us. And we need to look out for them when we're driving cars, because I think we have a higher responsibility because we're in a much safer position than they are. So I've got a few tips for us this morning that I hope you'll think about. If you ride a bike, a couple of obvious things. Should not ride impaired or distracted. I actually saw a guy texting on a motorcycle not too long ago, and I could not believe my eyeballs. The guy was holding a phone in his left hand, thumbing it while he's riding the motorcycle. Now, perhaps I'm just jealous of his dexterity, because I could not even fashion doing that. I'm not sure I could physically do it if I wanted to. But I said to myself, that I wish I had a camera to take a picture of it, because I'm thinking to myself, this is one of the most dangerous things I've ever seen anybody do on the highway. But obviously, impaired or distracted on a motorcycle is far more dangerous than even in a car, and it's dangerous anywhere. Obviously, you should obey traffic laws, wear a DOT-compliant helmet and some other protective gear. In the summertime, I see kids on the back of bikes, especially young women. They're wearing shorts. They have no protection on their legs or their upper body. And they have a helmet. I'll give them a good check mark for that. But I'm thinking if you fall off the bike, just bare skin on a road, that can't end very well. And you could fall off in a parking lot and get seriously hurt, never mind on the highway. Try to put something on that's visibly bright. Use some reflective tape. I know it may not look so cool, but you want to, again, be seen. Avoid riding in the rain, bad weather. And that's mainly because two things. Number one, you don't want to try to hydroplane on a motorcycle if you hit a puddle. But more importantly, on a gray day like this morning, if you're on a dark motorcycle wearing dark clothes, you may not be seen very well. I mean, I know the motorcycle's light is always on, but you may not be seen. One of the things I see motorcycle guys do a lot is they don't use their turn signals very well. They can flick their wrist and basically switch lanes. Well, you know what? You got to drive very defensively. You want to use your turn signals at every turn, or whenever you do a lane change. Combine that with a hand signal and a turn signals. That makes you a lot more visible in traffic. And of course, you want to position yourself in a lane where you're most visible to other drivers, where they can see you. Now, I'm not picking on the bike riders. I love them, but I'm more worried about them than anything else because of all these issues. Now, if you're driving a car, as I said earlier, you have a greater responsibility because you're in a safer position. Again, obviously, we don't need to talk about distracted driving yourself or driving impaired. I mean, that's just tragic consequences waiting to happen. But don't try to share the lane with a motorcycle, which is hard to believe, but people try to do this at times. According to the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, when motorcycles crash with other vehicles, it's usually because the other vehicle violated the motorcyclist's right of way. Remember, the motorcycle has the same right to the road as you do. So don't, again, if they're in the lane, that's their spot. No different than when you're in the lane, it's your spot. You can't both occupy the same place at the same time. That just generally doesn't work very well. When you're near motorcycles, you need to be more defensive driver. Again, treat it like a bad weather day. Back up a little bit. Put more room between you and the bike, If there's one right behind you, signal your intentions long before changing lanes or merging with traffic, so that the motorcyclist can see what you're doing. Be very wary of motorcycles being in your blind spot. That's a problem on the highways. A lot of times if a motorcycle is going to pass and you're in the right lane, you do have a blind spot. Well, a motorcycle takes up even less space than a car, so the blind spot is even a greater issue with motorcycles. I know that when I used to ride, I would try to be as far to the left as I could be in my lane when I tried to approach a car out of great fear of the blind spot. Now, road conditions are minor. I mean, think about this. A road condition that's a minor annoyance to you, for example, like a rain this morning, that really poses major hazards to motorcyclists. Putting aside the fact that I mentioned a few minutes ago that maybe they shouldn't be out in bad weather, people do ride when they need to ride. Again, they have the right to be there. So, again, when we talk about road conditions and weather conditions, for example, a motorcycle might swerve to miss a pothole that you might just drive right through. Those are the kinds of things that happen. The earliest part of the year, which I always believe April will be a very dangerous month for motorcycles because there's still a lot of sand on the roads from winter. Until we have enough rains to wash it away, which I would think we have by now. Going to an off-ramp with a bunch of sand in it can really cause a motorcycle to lose its footing and basically come out from under the bike. And as I mentioned earlier, allow a longer following distance, at least 3 to 4 seconds when following a bike, so the bike has enough time to maneuver or stop in an emergency. Again, this is Motorcycle Safety Month. I really don't want to, sadly at some point we're going to hear about a motorcycle crash. It's bound to happen. I cringe when I hear about them. One thing I would say to you, if you're buying a bike, folks, or if you're going to look at a new motorcycle, I would want to get one that has ABS on it. Just like a car, anti-locking brakes on a motorcycle are even more valuable than it is in a car. When I looked at the numbers from the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, the rate of fatal crashes is 31% lower for motorcycles equipped with ABS than for the same models without ABS, for the same exact model. So if you're going to look at buying a motorcycle, you may want to get the one with ABS. And the reason for that, again, is the ABS prevents the wheels from locking up. So if you have to go into a panic stop on a motorcycle because someone just slammed the brakes on in front of you with a car, for example, and there's no place to go and you just grabbing the brakes to stop, I would want to have ABS on my bike because obviously you don't want to have a skid. And usually when a motorcycle skids, that generally ends up with a serious fall. And we want to avoid those. So, folks, please ride safely this summer. I'll see lots of you out there, and I enjoy seeing motorcycles. I love them, but I don't want to read about them in the newspaper.